Yo, what is up, everybody? XRP's at $1.09 right now in CoinMarketCap. Our first tweet comes from RippleZitty. Just in, rumors surfaced that an alleged internal BlackRock risk report flagged XRP for potential multi-asset bridge strategy. Our next tweet comes from Franklin Templeton Digital Assets. When we realized blockchain could enable settlements in seconds, not weeks, everyone was surprised, even the regulators. Sandy Cole recalls the early days of building on-chain at Franklin Templeton on the Block by Block podcast with Danielle Dexon, CEO of Stellar.org. Let's watch this video.
Well, today, if I wanted to transfer my mutual fund shares to you, that would be a paper-based request, and it would take me about 3 to 4 weeks to get that happening, right? We can do this within seconds, and the SEC was very worried, and they're like, well, what's going to happen? You can't just move securities around like that. You can't just transfer them like that. And we're like, the name of what we do is the transfer agency. How can you tell us we can't transfer when we're a transfer agent? And even they realized, yeah, I guess this sounds a little silly, but they had never encountered this as a possibility before, and it raised a lot of concerns.
Smash that subscribe button and hit that like button if you believe XRP will reach $3 again this year. Our next tweet comes from Coin Bureau. BlackRock signals exotic crypto ETFs are coming. The world's largest asset manager says more exotic crypto ETF structure will likely launch in the future, but the firm says it will take a discerning approach before adding more complex structures to its iShares ETF. Our next tweet comes from Christine Lagarde. I welcome today's vote by Europol yen to make sure that the euro, both in cash and digital form, is accepted everywhere in the euro area. Let's watch this video.
So the European Parliament has just voted to make sure that the euro, both in cash and in digital form, will be accepted everywhere in the euro area. What comes next? The European Parliament, the European Council, and the European Commission are going to work together to come out with a final version that will apply across the board. Once that happens, the trilogue, as it's called, is over and satisfactory, then we, at the European Central Bank, we will get started with rolling out all the technical work, the testing, the piloting, so that as soon as we can, and as soon as it is technically solid, valid, and safe, we will be able to launch the digital euro, as well, of course, as cash, coins, and banknotes. They will complement each other.
Our next tweet comes from Bank XRP. For the Clarity Act to advance, an ethics agreement is the key to unlocking the rest of the negotiations, Eleanor Tourette reports. If we can get ethics, the rest of the bill will come together, according to industry participants. Our next tweet comes from Digital Asset Buy. BlackRock can't talk about XRP, R3 can't talk about XRP, Elon Musk can't talk about XRP, they can all talk about Bitcoin and Ethereum. I predict one day they're all talking about XRP, lock in, let's watch this video.
How about an XRP ETF? I know you got Ether out there. How about XRP? Can you answer that?
I can't. And you don't want me to.
I do.
Well, I can't.
All right, they're giving me the rap. Thank you.
Given how punitive the SEC has been towards crypto under this administration, do you envision the XRP ledger being incorporated into the financial institutions in the future?
Well, I certainly cannot speak to any specific crypto, but you know, I do think that the sort of cryptocurrency is an interesting and probably valuable bulwark against a centralized control. So, you know, this is definitely not an endorsement or lack of endorsement for XRP, but I do think crypto, by its very nature, it helps with individual freedom.
You still working with Ripple at all as a company? I know that there was some extracurricular activity that was working its way through the courts, but and it's since been resolved. But I'm curious if there's ongoing discussions, since one of their primary focus is on the interbank settlement component that you're also touching.
So, frankly, Ripple's probably the only topic I can't talk about. I just don't talk about it. I can't talk about it. I can't talk about.
Our next tweet comes from Crypto Barbie. Breaking: the SEC just released its regulatory agenda for 2026. We will ensure that the next chapter of financial leadership is written in the US. Our next tweet comes from Coach TY. Strong institutional signals today. Larry Fink, BlackRock, in almost every period of our lifetime, buying the dips benefited you. Plus, we are just at the beginning of growing the global capital market. Franklin Templeton executive XRP is already well past the journey versus new chains popping up weekly asking for issuance. Big money knows where this is headed. Do you? Let's watch this video.
On their chain. How do you evaluate the right chain and specifically, like, where does XRP fit into that, and what are you excited about with regards to XRP and institutional adoption and also the chains that come to you, which I'm sure are coming to you weekly at this point?
Well, yeah, because there's a lot of new chains too, and I think one of the things that another trend that you see globally is that very large institutions, kind of whales that are sitting out there in the global economy, are finding, they're understanding this ecosystem a little bit more, and they're trying to migrate people to using, chains or side chains that they have decided to kind of adopt. And so you do see a proliferation of that. And, from Franklin Templeton's perspective, we're going to go where the customers are, quite frankly, right? You're always listening to your customers, and, XRP, and the community around XRP is pretty aggressive at, growing and iterating for these purposes, these trillions of dollars purposes that, that we've been speaking about before. And so we have a lot of enthusiasm about working with the team specifically. When our journey started with the global regulators, and, we touch a lot of different global regulators, we did create a kind of a selection criteria that kind of, I hesitate to use the word protocol, but it does become kind of a standard when you're the first one through the door and you're learning up these regulators, quite frankly, toward, not that you're, trying to be a decentralized, permissionless issuer of an asset, but you're actually, you're in a securities business and you're permissioned and you're just trying to use these rails as your underlying, data kind of database operating system by and large. And so there's a number of things that we kind of punched through there with the regulators to put that template in place. But we think that, XRP is, well past the journey of even new chains, toward that end. And I think, quite frankly, one of the things that we like the most as the technology at XRP continues to iterate is just the leadership. When I go into meetings with XRP and Ripple, I'm looking at, quite frankly, I'm like looking in the mirror at people that have the same, decades of experience in developing these things, as opposed to just we want to move fast and break shit and and move forward. And so it's wisdom of applying these things that's super important. It's not always just the technology; it's the leadership that's implementing the technology, quite frankly, toward broad purposes, that's going to determine the success of the project.
Our next tweet comes from RippleZitty. Just in, Japan leads the world in XRP adoption. Our next tweet comes from the Crypto Square. Clarity update. Senator Kevin Cramer says the Clarity Act could advance before August 7, highlighting growing bipartisan momentum as lawmakers continue working toward digital asset legislation. The finish line may be closer than ever. Let's watch this video.
Well, it does. The Clarity Act is a little, we did pass it out of the committee, as you know, out of the banking committee with Democratic votes, but even the Democrats that voted for it in committee won't vote for it on the floor unless a couple of things are straightened out, one of them being some of the ethics language, which I think, by the way, Democrats are insisting on simply because Donald Trump's the president. Right. And because he's successful at business, which is bizarre to me. I mean, if we punished every president who was successful at something and said they can't legislate, if they're a farmer like Jimmy Carter, they can't sign a farm bill. I mean, Hoover was in the mining business, for crying out loud. There are lots of potential conflicts, but it's all about Donald Trump in this case. I think there are a couple of those things. That's something that the White House is going to have to work out with Democrats, quite honestly. Yeah. It's between them. And if the CFTC commissioner chair thinks that we're close, it may be something. There may be something that we know that he knows that we don't know. So I'm still.
Our next tweet comes from Smoke DQG. Swift, Cybos, XRP, and XLM will play a significant role in the flywheel adoption of cryptocurrencies. XRP plus XLM Swift knows. Listen closely. Let's watch this video.
The front office is automated. There's low latency. Then you switch gears. Banks operate still typically in terms of batch processing, store and forward, and payments, messaging, clearing, and settlement are often decoupled and can take days. This dichotomy is just unsustainable. And in response, we're seeing and hearing at Sibos how a number of FIs and FI-backed consortiums are harnessing blockchain, smart contracts, digital assets to align the performance of banking and payment systems with those of the digital economy. The second takeaway, I'd say, is that the Internet of Value is beginning to crystallize. And let me start with a framework. Let's think of the old industrial flywheels that take a lot of energy to make a half turn and a full turn. But once they start turning, there's momentum and it's hard to stop them. So let's overlay adoption of blockchain and digital assets. They've proven value. So part of the first turn, feasibility, certainly. And now we're seeing these use cases get into the bottom of that first turn, economic viability. And there's some exciting initiatives we heard about at Sibos around interbank payments, delivery versus payments, for example, correspondent banking, messaging, cross-border, interbank, intrabank, intra-company, and importantly, when we get to the ESG, the S part, remittances. So lots of interesting energy there. And we're seeing cryptocurrencies like XRP, Stellar Lumens, and stablecoins like USDC playing an important role in getting that wheel to turn and deliver the Internet of Value. Also, the introduction of central bank digital currencies will accelerate the mainstreaming of digital assets. I'd say my third, coming to the crown jewel here, cryptocurrencies are gaining legitimacy as a new asset class. When the Bitcoin paper first came out, it was going to be the missing link, the Internet of Value, a medium of exchange. But as we know, Bitcoin failed as a medium of exchange for legal activities. Then the pivot was to blockchain, distributed ledger technology as the new disruptor. Now we're seeing Bitcoin as in the lead as a new digital asset class, which has profound implications. It's been initially driven by retail investors. Now we're seeing institutional investors enter the game. And with institutional investors, you get more sophisticated demand. And that certainly is going to accelerate developments in decentralized finance.
Our next tweet comes from Zave Crypto. Breaking, Monica Long reveals Bank of America CEO says we're all in on XRP. Once BlackRock announces the XRP ETF, the floodgates are about to burst. Let's watch this video.
It feels like the floodgates are going to open this year, doesn't it? I mean, so within the past week, a couple weeks, so SAB 121 being called back or rolled back. And I mean, within, it felt like minutes, you hear from CEOs like Bank of America saying we're all in. And, these are institutions that Bank of America was one of our early partners when we were doing kind of like the messaging software only payment solution. So we've worked with these types of banks for a long time, and the lack of clarity and I think in the more recent time, even hostility toward, hey, using these assets and this technology is not okay. It's dangerous, which is not the best way to handle it, as we would say. But looking forward, I would say, yes, it seems like there's going to be a sea change this year. And even I could say post-November, the US election result, even just the ongoing conversations we've had with banks around being reserve bank or transaction banking partners for the stablecoin or for our payments business, like the tone and message changed overnight. Like it was quick.
Real quick, if this helped, press the like button. It tells YouTube to show this to people who want the truth, not hype. And press the subscribe button if you're done being sold the moon. I've already got your next one right here. Go.